And what I thought we might start with doing is just get a little bit of an understanding from you about how Kacific started and why you founded Kacific in the first place. What was its purpose?
Yeah. Well, I've had a long career in satellite generally. First started in the broadcast business, then in broadband later. I moved on to broadband, helped quite a few satellite operators to look into broadband rather than broadcast. And I learned a lot about the markets during these years of consulting, and realized that there was essentially only one internet. There's not the internet for the rural areas and the internet for the urban areas. There's only one internet for the world. You have only one YouTube. You only have one Zoom, one Microsoft Team, whatever. And either you have the right amount of bandwidth and the right price point to use that bandwidth, or you actually don't use the internet at all. Because, right, if you start paying, even if you pay a little bit, and you don't get enough bandwidth, then you will not use it. And I also realized that, the internet in these rural areas of the developing world, especially in Asia, which was my area of focus for all these years, the internet is fundamental in these areas. It can save lives. It can transform completely the landscape, the economic landscape, the education landscape of these areas. Essentially, what I did is that I kind of snowballed the business. It was a huge endeavor for me, to go and raise $250 million. Who was I? Just a consultant, helping companies. But then, the project snowballed because it made sense, because investors saw that, yes, it hits the spot. We think that you can actually change the landscape there in these areas. And progressively, telcos and ISP responded to the value proposition we were giving to them. We were telling them, look, if we put a satellite in space that hits that price point with that kind of service quality, what do you think? Will you sign up? And so they did. And in December 2019, after a long and rocky road, I will spare you of the details, but we had managed to finance a satellite, to buy a satellite from Boeing, which we had specified, and we launched it in December 19 on top of a SpaceX rocket in the US. And the satellite entered service in March 2020. And just to show you that, in fact, we were right in focusing on that market that was not the most appealing market, to tell you the truth, right? It's a market with kind of average willingness to pay, remote areas, people who were not the most affluent type of end users, but we managed to achieve a EBITDA positive in the company just 1 year after launching the satellite. We exceeded 10,000 sites, and these are not small sites. Some are huge sites that sometimes serve an entire small city, where we feed the internet into the city itself. So it's a small provincial town. Sometimes we have like a site that, a plantation, a mining operation that we feed with our internet. So we have 10,000 of these sites today, more than 10,000. And in particular, we have a special business model that, we have established, where we have distributors across Papua New Guinea, and we're serving the entire Papua New Guinea today with that kind of service. And I think we're making a huge difference.
So that really means that you're providing a service where there has not been a service before. You're not replicating or duplicating a service that exists already.
Yes, well, there's a little bit of both, to tell you the truth. Generally, yes, you're right. We are providing service where there isn't anything. But in some cases, we are replacing outdated technology. like old microwave system, old ADSL systems that are not working very well or that don't hit the right service level of that what users would expect. So yeah, generally we are rolling out, I would say, like 80% of the time in places where there is nothing.
And what about the actual data speeds you're able to achieve from a satellite? How do they compare to terrestrial speeds in PNG?
It's very well. It's actually very similar than what you'd have in a city. You'd easily get 30. I mean, our flagship product is about 30 megabit per second down, 10 megabit per second up. But we have also plans that easily hit 100 or even more than 100 megabit per second. But what's important with us is that, yes, we could also offer plans that go up to 150 megabit per second, but then it would be highly variable depending on, congestion and things like this. So we try to provide packages that are more or less consistent throughout the day, where people can get a fairly constant type of speeds and access to internet.
And how much of your business is direct to account customers, and how much of it is through a wholesaler in PNG?
So we don't go direct at all, right. But we do have a model. So we are a wholesaler at heart, if you want. But in some cases, we have different sub-business models in that wholesaler business model, where on one end we provide, just the plain wholesale, where we sell just the satellite throughput, if you want. We open the tap and we provide that kind of service to the likes of Telecom PNG, Vodafone, etc. We open the tap on the satellite and we let them package the service. Basically, they receive a pipe of internet that they can distribute amongst many sites. And then we have another service that we call Gig Starter, which is a business model where we pre-package the service for the reseller. So we don't sell megabits coming from the satellite. We don't sell throughput. We sell broadband plans. So we basically sell a broadband plan to a reseller, to a licensed reseller. We're not a licensee. We are a wholesaler. We provide international bandwidth to that reseller, and that licensed reseller then takes that package bandwidth, so basically a broadband plan, and then on-sells that broadband plan to the market with a markup. And so that's very, very simple for them. It's almost like, being a repository for a product, and they're on-selling that product to the market with a trade margin.
One of the things I've observed over the last 2 or 3 years is the enormous number of satellite launches that are happening all over the world, with private companies getting really heavily involved in launching more and more satellites. Where do you see satellite technology changing and making a big difference, particularly to business, not just in PNG, but around the world?
Or the price of internet generally, the price of bandwidth is eroding fast because of the new technologies and because of the demand. Essentially, a broadband satellite operator can count on the market today. They know that when they launch a satellite, as long as the satellite is designed properly, they will find the market. At least that was the principle on which we based our business. We knew there was a market. We were convinced there was a market, and therefore we established our business on the basis of a high volume of trading, which then we could enter the market with confidence with a low price, right?
Yeah.
And so generally, because of that decreasing or eroding price per megabit per second, you now have new applications and new areas where satellite can play a role. You have more and more satellite being able to, I wouldn't say compete, but complement fiber in urban areas. We see it, even in Port Moresby, we see people taking satellite in places where fiber hasn't reached, and yet they don't feel, like having a substandard internet compared to their neighbor on fiber. It is something that is fairly similar. This fairly similar price point. So that's quite important, because that means that satellite can really be part of the mix and allows then governments, telcos to launch the likes of e-citizen programs, online marketplaces where the economy can grow, and that's really satellite can be part of that mix, even in in the developing world. And so that's very, very important, because what you have in PNG today is generally a lack of communication. If you look at the 2019 PNG 100 CEO survey, unreliable telecommunication was the #1 factor affecting businesses, right? So satellites, slowly becomes available. There's more competition, but also there's more supply addressing the demand, and then allowing economy to grow, allowing government to offer e-citizen platforms, and so that's where satellite finds its role today.